Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
There's this moment, sometime around 4 in the afternoon, where the light hits my kitchen window just right, and everything goes quiet, like the world's holding its breath. That's when it gets the loudest in my head. That's when I remember I used to have a life that didn't revolve around boiling potatoes and rationing pain meds. I'm 42 years old, bald in patches, down 40 pounds, and my stomach still curls every time I get another envelope with urgent in red ink across the top. I live in a duplex in Muncie, Indiana, where the water takes forever to get hot and the upstairs neighbor practices drums at exactly 9 every night. It's a rough little place, with cracked linoleum floors and the faint smell of mildew that's baked into the walls. But it's what I could afford when the chemo started and my landlord took pity on me after seeing my scalp and my collection of hospital bracelets. I used to have a savings account. Used to have a fiancé too, but one day he woke up and said he didn't sign up to watch someone fall apart cell by cell. Said it kindly too. Like that made it better. He left his key on the kitchen table and I found it next to the blood pressure cuff I'd been using on Dad. The worst part was that I understood. He'd been carrying a ghost around for months. I could see it in his eyes every time he looked at me, like I was already gone. Dad died last winter, quietly, in that same kitchen chair he loved. He had a blanket over his lap, one sock on, CNN on mute. I was in the bathroom for maybe 3 minutes brushing my teeth, and when I came back, he was gone. I shook him like I could wake him. Cried into his shoulder until my shirt was soaked. Called 911 and sat with him until they came. The paramedic said he went peacefully, like that's supposed to mean anything. But he was alone when it happened. That's what kills me. I wasn't even there for his last breath. Michael didn't come to the funeral. Said he had a work retreat in Miami and couldn't get out of it. Mom sent flowers. A big, obnoxious wreath that said "Forever in our hearts," like she was trying to win a contest. She didn't even write a card herself. I recognized the handwriting from the florist. That's how far I'd slipped down their priority list, to the level of outsourced condolences. They knew I was sick. I told them. Sent an email, then a call, then another. Even showed Mom the scan at Christmas, when I still had energy to pretend we were a family. She patted my hand and said, "You'll beat this. You're strong like your dad." Then she passed me the mashed potatoes and asked if I could keep my scarf on during dinner because it was a bit upsetting. And I was strong. Or stupid. Maybe both. I kept quiet. Didn't scream or beg or fall apart in front of them because I thought dignity would mean something. Turns out, silence just made me easy to forget. Yesterday, I went to the pantry and all I had left was a single russet potato and a half box of saltines. I sliced the potato into thin pieces, dropped it in water, and waited. My hand shook as I held the knife. From weakness or rage, I don't even know anymore. It's all tangled up now. The fear, the anger, the humiliation. You feel it in your gums, behind your eyes, in your knuckles. While the water boiled, I picked up my phone to distract myself, bad habit I haven't kicked, and tapped open Instagram. First post. My brother Michael, holding a drink with a paper umbrella in it. Behind him, bright turquoise water and a giant cruise ship. 40th birthday cruise with the best woman I know, thanks Mom. Family is everything. My breath caught in my throat so hard I had to sit down. I scrolled through the album, 10 photos in total. Mom in a sun hat, Michael in swim trunks, buffet tables, a karaoke night, matching shirts that said "Sailin' into 40," and one with the caption "Blessed to be surrounded by love." I've had nothing but debt collectors surrounding me for months. I've spent nights sleeping upright because the pain in my chest from the chemo made it feel like my ribs were splitting apart. I bled through my sheets one night because I couldn't afford a refill on one of the anti-nausea meds. I sold my microwave, my television, my winter coat. All while they were off somewhere laughing under palm trees. Do you know what it feels like to see your family celebrating life while you're trying to keep yours from slipping away completely? It feels like drowning, slow and cruel. But worse, because they're the ones holding your head under. I didn't scream, didn't send a message, didn't even react. I just watched the photos until I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled past Michael, past Mom, past my Aunt Kathy who never called me back, past my cousin Jen who said she'd pray for me but never visited once. One by one, I deleted them all. No dramatic speeches, just swipes and taps, over and over until the screen was empty. Except for one. Dad's voicemail. The one I saved the week he died. I play it sometimes when I feel like I'm slipping off the edge. It's only 13 seconds long. Hey Magpie, just checking in. Let me know if you need anything. I'll come by after Jeopardy. That's it. That's the last time anyone in my family truly saw me, heard me, cared enough to ask. And he's the one they buried. You never really forget the moment your body stops feeling like yours and starts becoming a battleground for statistics, side effects, and sterile hallway conversations about odds, and we'll try our best. It was a Wednesday in late October when the oncologist with kind eyes and a folder the thickness of a phone book told me, very gently, that the lump I'd been ignoring was not only malignant, but aggressive. I remember gripping the edge of the chair because the floor felt like it had disappeared beneath me. I nodded a lot, like I understood what she was saying, but I only heard pieces, stages, chemo, surgery, infusion schedule, and then the word that made everything go silent, likely survivable, with the right plan and support. Support. That word clung to the back of my throat like dry bread. I left that office with a stack of pamphlets, a list of prescriptions longer than a CVS receipt, and a heart pounding so hard I thought I might vomit in the parking garage elevator. I sat in my car for over an hour, keys in hand, calling the people I thought might care enough to help me breathe through the fear. First, my mother. Straight to voicemail. No big deal, I thought. She's probably just in the middle of one of those yoga classes she always brags about but never sticks to past 3 sessions. I left a message, voice shaking, trying not to cry, telling her about the diagnosis and asking her to call me back as soon as she could. Next, Michael. My brother. My golden child, hedge fund running, boat buying, never answers on the first try brother. He actually replied. Not with a call. No. A text. Can't talk right now. Heading into a client dinner. Can we chat next week? Next week. That week turned into 2. Then a month. Then he just stopped replying altogether, as if my illness was a project he could ignore until it resolved itself. He didn't ask about doctors or appointments or costs, or if I needed a ride. He didn't even ask if I was scared. And the answer was yes. Yes, I was terrified. See, I wasn't just battling cancer. I was doing it alone, and I was broke. Even with insurance, the numbers were brutal. The first MRI was $1,000 out of pocket. The biopsy? Nearly $3,000. Every time I sat in that cold chair with the 4 in my arm, I could practically hear the meter running in the background. Nausea meds, white blood cell boosters, ointments, medical bras, wigs, all extra. Even parking at the hospital cost $25 some days. Once, I got a parking ticket during a 5-hour infusion because my meter expired while I was dry heaving into a plastic bucket. That felt like a special kind of cruel. I tried to be smart. I canceled my Netflix, stopped using the dryer to save on electric, sold my gym equipment on Craigslist. My old engagement ring went next. I pawned it for barely $900, and I used that to cover a month's worth of pills that kept my food down. I didn't cry when the man behind the glass handed me the cash, but I cried 2 hours later when the meds finally let me eat soup without throwing up. And while I was balancing all that, Michael posted a photo of his new boat. I remember the caption because it made my stomach twist. Work hard, reward yourself harder. Life's too short to wait. It had over 200 likes, including one from our mother. I had to stop myself from smashing my phone against the wall. I remember doing the math. My treatment plan would cost about $70,000, and I had already paid off around $5,000, so that left What, 25 grand left? Wait, no, wait, that's not right. 70 minus 5 is, oh, who cares? The number didn't matter. It was already drowning me. There were nights when I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I became this invisible. How a woman who once planned her wedding on a Pinterest board filled with sunflowers and blue hydrangeas now had to Google how to get medical debt collectors to stop calling. Every time the phone rang, my stomach tightened. It was never anyone checking in. It was always someone wanting something. Money, information, a reason I hadn't paid. After a while, I stopped calling. I stopped reaching out. I learned the hard way that people don't want to be bothered with someone else's suffering unless it makes them feel good about themselves. Sending flowers? That's easy. It looks nice. Makes them feel like they tried. But they didn't sit with me in the ER at 2 in the morning when I spiked a fever and couldn't stop shaking. They didn't bring groceries when I couldn't stand long enough to cook. They didn't see me at my lowest. They didn't want to. And then, one night, I was scrolling on Facebook, another bad habit, and saw a post from my third cousin, Sarah. She was gushing about how proud she was of Michael and how amazing it was that their mother believed in him enough to invest in his latest business opportunity. $25,000, she wrote. That's what family support looks like. I must have read it 6 times before the words really landed. 25,000. That wasn't a gift. That was the down payment on his second house, a lakefront place in Michigan. I saw the photos later, gleaming kitchen, fireplace, a wine fridge. Mom and Michael smiling in front of the sold sign like they'd just won the lottery. Meanwhile, I was selling old textbooks on eBay for $12 at a time just to afford food. That number, 25,000, it carved a hole into me that I don't think will ever fill back in. They had it. They had it, and they gave it to him without a thought. I wasn't worth even a fraction. I stared at that post until my laptop died. And when it went black, the reflection that stared back at me didn't even look human. Just a shell. Just someone who learned, finally and painfully, that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when everything goes dark. And they didn't. Not once. Not even close. There's something uniquely cruel about watching people give thanks around a table they didn't think you deserved to sit at. I hadn't planned on going to Thanksgiving that year. In fact, I had every intention of spending it on the worn-down couch in my living room, curled under a blanket that still smelled faintly of my father, with a can of generic green beans and some instant mashed potatoes if I felt ambitious. But when the loneliness got too loud and the wind outside started rattling the loose pane in the kitchen window like a child shaking a toy, I found myself grabbing my coat and getting into my car without much thought at all. I didn't tell them I was coming. I knew better than to expect a warm welcome, but I also knew that sometimes being seen, even when you're unwelcome, hurts less than being forgotten altogether. When I stepped through the door, no knock, no ceremony, the dining room was already half full, the table covered in crystal glasses and polished silverware, dishes steaming with butter and sugar, and every kind of excess. It smelled like cinnamon and cloves and expensive cheese. My mother turned around from the kitchen island, froze with a pie server in one hand, and said my name like she wasn't sure it was really me. I wasn't wearing a wig. I didn't have the energy for that sort of theater. My scalp was patchy, pale, and cold from the November wind. My cheeks were hollow, and the coat hung off me like I'd stolen it from someone bigger. I saw Michael first. He was laughing at something with his wife, drink in hand, full and content, with the face of someone who hadn't been near suffering in a long time. He looked up, his smile dropped half an inch, and he gave me the same look you'd give a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. No one offered me a plate. No one pulled out a chair. I stood there, awkward and exposed, like a ghost in a room full of the living. My mother said something about how you look tired, honey, and offered me a cup of cider like that would cover 2 years of silence and absence. I declined. My stomach was already twisted too tight to eat. Then she said it, with a tone that could have been concern if you squinted hard enough. You could have asked for help, you know. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the candied yams, but my hands did curl into fists in my pockets, and when I opened my mouth, my voice came out quiet and tight, the kind of voice that has been waiting too long to be heard. I did ask, I said. 6 times. I left voicemails. I sent emails. I asked you to come to one appointment. Just one. You said you were busy. Michael, who hadn't said a word until then, just shrugged like I'd accused him of forgetting to return a library book. You always wanted to be independent, he said, as if that explained everything. As if my suffering was some kind of protest, I stubbornly clung to out of pride. That's when I realized we weren't family. We were strangers who shared a blood type and a last name, nothing more. I didn't stay for dessert. I turned around and left before they could offer some half-hearted leftovers or awkward small talk about the weather. I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that swallows you whole, and when I walked through the front door, I didn't cry. I just took off my coat, sat down at the kitchen table, and looked at the ring box sitting in the drawer beneath the bills. The ring had belonged to someone I didn't recognize anymore. A younger, dumber version of me who believed in promises and forever and all the lies that sound good when someone's in love with your smile but not your storms. I put the ring in my coat pocket the next morning and walked it into a pawn shop with buzzing fluorescent lights and a bored teenager behind the counter. He barely looked at me before offering $200. I asked for $3. We settled at $250. That money bought me a refill of the anti-nausea pills and 1 week of groceries, give or take. I applied for medical bankruptcy after that. It's not a quick process. It's long, tedious, degrading. They ask for every document, every receipt, every account. They want to know how you got here and why you didn't fix it sooner, like being sick was a moral failure or a personal choice. My credit score plummeted like a stone in a river. I got used to letters stamped final notice and immediate response required. They stacked up on my table like confetti from a party no one wanted to be at. One day I came home to find a pink envelope stuck in the screen door, an invitation to Michael and Lisa's vow renewal in Aruba. 10 beautiful years, the card read, and still going strong. I turned it over and laughed. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my own spit. I hadn't gotten a birthday card in 3 years, but this was worth postage, apparently. I tossed the envelope in the trash and didn't think about it again until a few days later when my phone buzzed at midnight with a group text. Don't forget. Michael's surprise cruise is next week. No telling him. It was from my mother. Sent to a dozen names I didn't recognize. Meant for their Florida circle of friends and distant relatives. But she included me by mistake. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe some twisted part of her wanted me to see it. Wanted me to know that while I was rationing antibiotics and making soup out of powdered broth, they were busy planning deckside celebrations and poolside toasts for the son who never once lifted a finger for me. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I could have said something, anything, but I didn't. I just powered off the phone and sat in the dark, my hands trembling in my lap. It was then I realized something deep, something sharp, something I didn't want to admit until that moment. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been abandoned, deliberately, quietly, and with enough plausible deniability for them to sleep well at night. And that hurt more than all the silence in the world. The cruise came and went like a thunderstorm I watched from behind thick glass, loud, messy, full of false laughter and a stench of money I could almost smell through my phone screen. For an entire week, my brother and mother flooded their feeds with sun-drenched selfies, sparkling drinks balanced in manicured hands, and captions about making memories that last a lifetime. While I sat in the same threadbare recliner with a heating pad pressed against my chest and a bottle of expired painkillers tucked under a towel beside me. I didn't click the like button once, didn't comment, didn't even screenshot. I just watched in silence like some ghost wandering through someone else's afterlife, not angry, not crying, just numb from the quiet acceptance that this was who they were now. There was something about the way they smiled, too, not fake, not exaggerated, just absolutely untouched by anything even resembling guilt. They danced under string lights, wore matching shirts with corny slogans, toasted on the deck of the ship like they'd never once left someone behind to suffer with empty cabinets and a swelling pile of overdue notices. Every photo felt like a nail, not in a coffin, but in something much harder to bury, that last flicker of me that used to hope for repair, for reconciliation, for a family that might one day look back and say, we should have done more. And maybe I would have stayed there, in that quiet, unfeeling space, if it hadn't been for the email. It was buried deep in an old Gmail account I hadn't touched in years, the kind I only kept active because every now and then I needed a reminder of the person I used to be, the woman who still saved receipts, organized her inbox, believed in thank you notes and calendar reminders for birthdays. I had logged in to find a forgotten invoice from a long-defunct medical portal, and while scrolling through the dust of digital debris, I stumbled on a subject line from 5 years ago that just said, FYI, life insurance policy stuff. It was from Dad. I don't know why I never opened it before. Maybe I had, maybe I just forgot, but this time I clicked, and there it was, a short message about an old policy he'd taken out back when we were still kids, the kind meant to make sure no one's left scrambling if the worst happened. He'd mentioned 3 beneficiaries. Me, Michael, Mom, and even split, $50,000 total. I froze reading it, my fingers numb against the cold plastic of the laptop keys, because no one had ever told me about that money. Not once. And my name was on it. I tore through every drawer in my house that night. The filing cabinet. The cardboard box labeled taxes. The plastic storage bin under my bed with birth certificates and faded report cards and Dad's funeral pamphlet. I found a copy of his death certificate, a water-stained envelope with the original insurance paperwork inside, and a note in his handwriting that just said, "Don't forget this exists." My heart started pounding in a way that felt different, not fear, not anger, just the sharp clarity of someone realizing they'd been left out of something on purpose. When I called the insurance company the next day, the woman on the phone confirmed it like she was telling me the weather. Yes, she said, Michael Davis and Susan Davis claimed their portions shortly after the claim was opened 4 years ago. Your portion was never touched. I asked her what she needed from me, and she said just the death certificate and 2 forms of ID. I had both in my purse within minutes. She said the check would arrive in 5 to 10 business days. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even let myself think about what I would do with it until the envelope arrived, thick and stiff, the kind of envelope that smells like something matters inside. I opened it slowly, sitting at the kitchen table where I used to play Go Fish with Dad while he sipped black coffee and told me stories about dumb things he'd done in college. 50,000. The number looked like it belonged to someone else's account, not mine. But there it was, black and white. Real. For a few hours, I just held it in my lap and stared out the window like maybe the answer would appear in the trees. What do you do when the people who should have told you about a lifeline deliberately left you to drown? What do you do when the people who buried the only man who ever protected you are the same ones who buried your chance at dignity? I didn't buy a car. I didn't buy a vacation or a couch or new clothes. I didn't even buy a good dinner. I sat with that check and the weight of everything they'd taken from me and decided that the best gift I could give back, the only one that felt right, was silence. But not the kind they gave me. No, not the coward silence. Not the silence that says, I didn't see you suffering or it wasn't my responsibility. I wanted to build a different kind of silence. One that echoed. One that hurt. One that reminded them of everything they chose not to see, wrapped up in generosity with a blade tucked beneath the ribbon. The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office just outside of town, the kind with dusty furniture and a receptionist who offered me tea while I waited. When the lawyer asked what brought me in, I didn't explain the whole story. I didn't need to. I just slid the check across his desk like I was placing a winning hand in a poker game, leaned forward, and said, I'd like to start a foundation. In my dad's name, but with a twist. His eyebrows rose. He asked what kind of twist. And I smiled for the first time in months, Not a happy smile, not a healing smile, but the kind of grin you get when you finally feel your grip tightening on the steering wheel after months of skidding off course. Because I wasn't here to beg for scraps anymore. I was here to make sure they choked on their own comfort. Starting the foundation wasn't about redemption, and it sure as hell wasn't about healing, because there are some things no amount of paperwork or public service can fix. This wasn't about turning pain into purpose, not really, and it wasn't about making peace with the people who treated my suffering like it was background noise they could mute anytime it got too loud. No, it was about showing them exactly what silence can build when it's sharpened and pointed back at the people who fed it to you spoonful by spoonful. I named it the Fund for the Forgotten, not because I thought it was poetic, but because it was true. It was for the ones like me, the ones taking care of dying parents while working 2 jobs, the ones getting diagnosis after diagnosis and still having to figure out how to afford rent and groceries and gas for the car that barely runs. It was for the people who don't get prayer circles or casseroles or church bulletins printed with their names, the ones who suffer in apartments that smell like bleach and rubber gloves and medical tape. I knew their faces, even if I didn't know their names yet. I had seen their shadows in waiting rooms and hospital hallways and free clinic lines. With the lawyer's help and some patience, I set it up simple, micro grants, no strings attached, for single caregivers, long-term patients with denied claims, and those drowning in medical debt who'd fallen through every crack the system carved out. The intake form didn't ask for a sob story or 10 reference letters. It asked for 1 paragraph about what they needed and how soon they needed it. If I had read that when I was knee-deep in overdue bills and rotting teeth from chemo side effects, I might have actually believed someone out there cared. But the twist, well, that came later. I used part of the remaining money to buy targeted social media ads, and not just any ads. These weren't those broad, sweeping, feel-good donation drives that get lost between baby photos and political rants. I bought hyper-targeted Facebook ads and fed them into the algorithm with the accuracy of a sniper. My audience selection wasn't based on interests or keywords. It was based on connections. Friends of Michael Davis and Susan Davis. That's right. The campaign was designed to show up directly in the feeds of their golf buddies, their church group pals, their neighbors who think they're saints, and even Michael's real estate clients who probably had no idea he stepped over his sister's sick body on the way to his next big investment. The ad was simple, black and white, stark. A stock photo of an empty hospital bed. Text that read, "While some families take cruises, others drown in debt. Help us help the ones they left behind." Then a small line at the bottom, "The Fund for the Forgotten. In memory of Thomas A. Davis." I didn't use my name. I didn't need to. The algorithm did the rest. Within 3 days, it started getting traction. People clicked. People commented. A woman from our hometown who used to teach Michael in high school tagged others with things like, "Is this who I think it is? And didn't his sister have cancer?" Then came the shares. Then came the whispers. Then came the fallout. Michael called me 4 times in one day. Left 2 voicemails, the first with a half-hearted chuckle, saying, "Hey, I think there's been some kind of mistake," and the second, more clipped, "Call me back. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I didn't answer either. Then came Mom. She sent a long email that started with, "I don't know what you're trying to prove," and ended with, "Family should stick together." No mention of the money. No mention of the silence. Just a thin veil of maternal disappointment stretched over the threat of public embarrassment. Then came the handwritten letter. Shaky cursive on floral stationery she probably bought in bulk from QVC. "Why are you doing this?" it asked. "People are talking. You're hurting your brother's reputation. We never meant to leave you out. You could have just asked." As if I hadn't. As if asking had ever worked. I placed that letter in the same drawer I kept Dad's old voicemail. But I didn't play his voice that night. I didn't need to. The foundation kept growing, slow but steady. A journalist from a regional paper reached out. I didn't take the interview, but I told her she could use whatever was on the website. A few donors joined in. Small ones at first: teachers, nurses, a local librarian who said she'd lost her sister to breast cancer and knew what it meant to be invisible. And every time I approved another micro grant, every time I read the desperate gratitude in the thank you messages, it felt like lighting a match in a room full of mold. Like I was burning away something foul. But here's the part that still sticks in my teeth, the part one chew on when the house gets too quiet and the emails slow down. They never apologized. Not really. They never said, "We failed you." They never said, "We were wrong." They just wanted the noise to stop. They just wanted the silence back, the old version, the kind that let them sleep at night. I never told them why I stopped picking up. I didn't owe them that. Maybe one day, they'll figure it out. Maybe not. All I know is, I'm not the one drowning anymore.